Hey, Alisa.
Hey, Brooke. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing okay.
Awesome. So we were able to see each other, I think, for the first time at ng-conf, which was
Yes.
awesome. It was so much fun to have you there. It was like totally weird to actually meet people in person because it's been so long. I mean, it was like 2.5 years, and I don't know. Do you ever have those moments though? I think everybody's kind of said this where it's like you meet certain people and you're like, wow, you're so much taller than I thought, or something like that. But it was pretty easy
Yeah.
to meet everybody.
Yes. No, for sure. It was really, really great to meet people. People who I've been talking to for a while, online or through Twitter or through other sort of sources. So it's really nice to actually meet them in person. And
Yep.
I'm with you. I mean, I met my team for the first time earlier this year.
Okay.
Um, and same sort of thing. You see somebody in person, you're like, oh wow, you are a lot taller than I had
Yeah.
expected because you're always, I don't know, monitor height for me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then that is not the case always. So yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really fun to actually meet people and see people again. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
For sure. So we're gonna get into this, our main topic of like not just learning Angular, but learning like JavaScript and kind of back end stuff. This is one thing I really love about your story, and one reason I really, really wanted you on because you have such a cool background, and it just goes to show that like it doesn't matter what your background is, you can get into programming and be successful. And I really want to dive into your story and how you did that. But I thought it'd be fun if we started with a bit of a question so we can get to know you a little
Okay.
bit more. So I'm curious if you have any connections with like a celebrity at all, be that a family member or you've met a celebrity or just something like, do you have any kind of connection with any famous people?
Well, I don't think I've ever met any celebrities or anything like that. So definitely not that close. My only, let's say, celebrity connection, fairly tenuous, is I went to the same high school as Mark Hamill. So how about that? Yeah.
Oh, no way.
So
That is
he and
awesome.
I both are Navy brats. So we both graduated from a high school on a Navy base in Japan. And so that's our connection.
Oh,
And
wow.
he
So like,
sometimes shows up at the high school reunions. I've heard. Now I haven't been to one where he has been there yet, but maybe one day.
wow. Oh my gosh. That okay. So like not only is it small world, but like Japan of all places, even like that. So
Right.
was this Air Force? Was this like what branch of the military?
This is Navy.
Oh, you did say that. Okay, so Navy. So what did your dad, I'm assuming,
Hmm. My
what did
dad
he
was
do?
the Navy. Yep. He was on well, he was on a ship. And oh gosh. So his role on the ship is called a bosun.
Okay.
And basically he liked to say like main facilities guy.
Okay.
So,
Well, awesome. Okay, so I really don't have any like major celebrity connections. I guess I did do like a meet and greet VIP with a couple of musicians. So if you've ever heard of the band Echo Smith, who did that song Cool Kids,
no, I'm
met
sorry.
them. No, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. They're not super well known. So I met them, and then do you know Lindsay Sterling at all? That violinist.
I have heard of the name. Yep.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So met her as well. But like those were just silly VIP meet and greet things at concerts. But I
Well,
can't
very
claim Mark
fancy.
Hamill. Yeah, I think you've got the ultimate one on that one.
Certainly the nerd creds one, right?
Right, right. Yeah. I went to the same high school as Luke Skywalker. That's awesome. Oh man. All right. Well, okay. So like I said, I'm super excited to have you on the episode because so far what I've done is really focus on just kind of in general with my guests is how they've learned Angular, how they've and even JavaScript, like how they went about learning that. But most of them have come from like computer science backgrounds, and I really wanted to focus an episode on for someone that did not come from that traditional background and how the experience was for you and what went well, what didn't go well, like all of that. So I'm really excited to get into all of this. And one thing that I really love about your story is that you were a chemist. And I just think that is so fun. And I say, oh, I was a teacher, but I don't know. There's something about being a chemist that I think is like, talk about geek culture. I just think it's pretty cool. So let me introduce you though a little bit more, and then we can get into your journey. So Alisa is currently a senior developer advocate. And is it pronounced Okta?
It is pronounced
Okay,
Okta.
okay.
Yep.
All right, so at Okta, and you can also find her speaking though at various conferences and events, like we mentioned at ng-conf. That was a big one. And you love to create content, which I'm always looking for. Anything you put out, I think is such quality. So love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then another thing that you do that I've always loved, because I love the whole idea behind it, but you are on the leadership team for Coding and Cocktails, which is a program from Kansas City Women in Tech, and it teaches introductory web development to women like there in Kansas City, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you always have your cocktails as well.
Yes, the fancy cocktails too.
Oh,
Yes.
are they? Okay, so do you have a
yeah.
favorite cocktail?
Well, so it's very, very fancy, as in there's a bartender who custom crafts a cocktail, and sometimes will even craft it for the session we're learning. So sometimes it's CSS named
cool.
or ML named. So it's super fancy. And there's also mocktails, fancy mocktails as well. So
Oh, I love it. That's so much fun. I've heard of like when I was a teacher, they used to do things like donuts with dads or like muffins with moms, and they, the student and the mom or the student and the dad would come in early and they'd have their muffin or donut and you'd read together or whatever. But yours sounds a little bit more high scale. So, and then something else. So this is actually how I met you, was through your work with NG Girls, and you're on the core team with NG Girls. And I believe, like, weren't you part of like designing the curriculum for that, or what exactly do you do with NG Girls?
I help with the whatever organization needs. Most of our events have been in Europe, so it's limited as to what I can do. But that I also will have gone through the worksheet, the tutorial, and make any edits to it, make any updates. Right now, it seems like most of my my work has been just reviewing any messages, that communication that goes out. So there's NG Girls and NG Rome coming up next week, and we'll have somebody there for that. But yeah, hopefully we'll have a US event here soon.
It'd be great. I know you used to do them a lot at the ng-conf events, but with COVID that kind of stopped, and then you were doing them online, which was nice. But NG Girls is really important. I'm so glad that they're like that you guys have created it and that you've carried it on. I think a lot of groups and organizations unfortunately had to stop once the pandemic hit, and I'm just glad that you've carried it on and that it's been such a success. So thank you honestly for your work there, and not just for women but for people learning to program in general, because I think so many times it's just hard, right? Like it's hard, and maybe this is a great segue into our discussion with each other, because I think so often, I don't know, making a transition into a career, I think there's a lot of support in other fields. And I feel like programming is a little bit different. And the way that I'll explain that is just that, like, when I was a teacher, for example, when I was first getting into that, you first of all, during school, you have student teaching. And so instantly you're already being mentored even before you've graduated. But let's pretend maybe you didn't go through a traditional route and you did an alternate license to becoming a teacher, you still would have to do some kind of like mentor slash menteeship type structure where you can't just jump right into teaching. You have to have a mentor who's really coaching you along and watching over you as you start to actually teach. And then even after you've graduated that program and you've earned your degree, they still set you up with an official mentor who you check in with, if not daily, weekly at the very least. And then they'll also have someone come in from the school district level who will give you additional training. And that goes on for at least 2 years. So I don't know. I think with programming, it's not like such an organized structure like that, right? Like there isn't really, some companies do it really great, but when you're first getting in and you're first learning it, I'm yet to really see a really well organized structure where they give you that kind of hands-on like apprenticeship kind of a model, So I don't know, what was your experience getting in? Did you feel like you had a lot of support? Did you not feel like you had a lot of support? What was that like?
Sure. So my background was, yes, I was working as a chemist. And at the time when I decided to transition into programming, there weren't a lot of boot camps out there. This was in early 2000s. So there wasn't a lot of boot camps out there. So what I ended up doing was I went back to school.
Okay.
And I got most of my credits transferred over from my chemistry degree. So I just had to take the comp sci classes. And so I went back and got a bachelor's degree in computer science. I was incredible. So, I mean, other people, they would have opportunities for, being able to intern someplace, right, and getting that experience. And I didn't have that. But I was incredibly, incredibly fortunate to land where I did for my first job.
Okay.
It was a company called Perceptive Software here actually in the Kansas side. I live right on the border of Kansas and Missouri, so it was on the Kansas side. Fantastic place to work. There was a lot of other people who were also new developers, but we were all supported. We had opportunities to really try things.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Now, the language was C++.
Okay.
It was but that really, I think, kicked off a lot for me. And it was also such a culture of learning there. Everybody was, we had a lot of lunch and learns. We had a lot of, everybody would watch different conference videos, and we would all read Dr. Dobbs magazines, so there was a lot of learning culture and a lot of questioning culture, right?
Okay.
So there was a lot of it was very open, very friendly conversations of what did I learn, or why did I approach something this way, or you can ask each other that. And that was really, really great. And it worked for me really well.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Now, do you think it's common for companies to have such a structured learning process, or do you feel like it's kind of more rare to find? Is it hit or miss? What's been your experience as you've gone around to other companies?
I think it is definitely hit or miss. And I think I think there's a difference, at least from my perspective, about structure. So having some sort of a structured mentorship learning program versus having that opportunity to kind of just go for it.
Right.
I think what Perceptive did was they gave you the opportunity to go for it.
Yeah.
They weren't structured at all, but they didn't have any limits on what you should learn or what you had to learn or what you know what I'm saying? So it was, they gave you enough, enough rope to really be able to go do something yourself and learn, or to trip up, right?
Okay. Learn the hard way, learn through the mistake, which isn't wrong. It's not bad. What I'm curious about then is, what were they doing? What was the leadership doing, or even the coworkers? How were they creating a safe environment where you felt like it was okay to make mistakes and it was okay to reach out and ask questions? Because I know not every company does that successfully. Sometimes developers get in there and they feel like, if I expose that I don't know these answers, they're going to feel like I hoodwinked them somehow and they're going to regret hiring me. So, and I think that really is like, it's a culture. It's kind of bred in, some companies just do it more effectively where they really allow for that curiosity and that learning and that growth. It sounds like you had that there. So what do you feel like your company was doing that really created that kind of learning environment?
It was much more of a flat organizational structure. So I think that was certainly new for me, right? It was which a lot more hierarchy in the past. So it was just much more flat, and they had a interview process that did require a test. I mean, it
Okay.
just happened, but it wasn't a maybe what you might expect as traditional whiteboard test.
Right.
It was a really fantastic test, actually. It
Okay.
was write some code for a particular scenario,
Okay.
and you had to it was pencil and paper and just
Oh, wow.
write it out. Yeah.
Okay.
And the goal of that just being they wanted to make sure you understood basic programming concepts. And I totally messed up because I was supposed to write it in C++, but I had been writing Java more recently, so I think I got some of my syntax confused, but they didn't care about that. They're like, well,
You still
this
know.
is a Java keyword. I'm like, yeah, I know. Oops, but you know what you know what I
Yeah.
mean. Just
Yeah.
apply the C++ equivalent. But so we made sure that there was a basic like that everybody started off with, but then there was also no ego, and I think that was
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah.
Even the titles were very, very flat. I think almost everybody had the title of software engineer. They didn't distinguish,
Love that.
and that was really, really nice
Yeah.
as well, I thought.
Yeah. It was actually my first job coming in. I remember I had applied, and on my application, or on my resume, sorry, I had put junior developer, that I had some
Mhm.
experience as a junior dev. And I got into it was actually the interview with the um the guy who ended up hiring me, the lead manager. And it really stuck with me because he said, now your application stood out to me because you have on here junior developer. And I was like, oh. And he said, nobody else is putting that anymore. And he's like, usually people are pretty egotistic. They don't want you to know that they're below, but I thought it was so common, and I wanted to be honest with where I was with
Mhm.
my skills, but boy, that really kind of caught me off guard. And I appreciated that about him, though, that he immediately from day one made that very clear to me that we don't we don't call each other juniors, or like that title, that it just didn't
Mhm.
matter to him. He basically was saying, I don't care that you don't have a lot of experience yet, you're not a junior here, and you won't be. So I loved that, and I think that's so important. So I totally agree with you. um Tell me a little bit, though. I'm curious because, as we've said, you came from chemistry. So how did that happen? Like, first of all, what made you go into chemistry, and then what made you go into programming after that? What made you want to switch?
Sure, yeah. So I started off with chemistry because I really enjoyed it in high school, and I knew that I wanted to be in some sort of a STEM degree. Computer science was just kind of at the beginning of like a mm, curriculum learning program. So
Okay.
I graduated high school in 1994. So it was just like the internet was just happening. It was it wasn't something that I thought of specifically that I wanted to do, even though I did take some programming classes in high school.
Okay.
So chemistry it was, and then specifically where I went to school, it was chemistry with something called polymers and coatings
Okay.
specialty, which meant that I made paint.
Awesome.
Uh, yes, but not house paint. It was like industrial coating. So nothing
Okay.
as um, maybe as practical as you might see. This was like for industrial areas of
Okay.
use.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was what I did, and I did that specifically within chemistry because it was a marketable
Mm,
field. There's actually not a lot of places that provide this sort of education
right.
for people to go into specifically coatings. So, which I have to be really careful. Coatings, not coding, right?
That's
So,
true. I hadn't realized that. That's cool.
yep. So I was a chemist for about 10 years and then decided to go into computer. Well, actually, I decided to transition out of chemistry
Okay.
and I looked at pharmacy as an option. I thought that'd be kind of cool. But I would have to take a lot of classes. Like they wouldn't take my organic chemistry credits. I'd have to go back to like take organic chemistry, do a whole bunch of chemistry classes. All that wouldn't transfer. So I said, "Oh, never mind. I'm not
Yeah.
interested
Yeah.
in that." But I could look at comp sci, which is something I enjoyed also when I took comp sci classes in college as well. So I thought, okay, well, let's try this because I think as a chemist, as a STEM person, really enjoy like really solving puzzles, right?
Mhm.
That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
putting together logical pieces and being a puzzle solver. And
Yeah.
I saw a lot of that with being having to approach writing code
Right.
very logically, very with a lot of consideration. So I thought that that would be something I'd enjoy as well. Now, one thing that I knew that I wouldn't have between chemistry and writing code is like being able to work with my hands quite as much, right?
Okay.
Everything is on the computer and
Right.
you see output, which is why I think doing UI work is always particularly fun because you get to see the output of
Right.
that, what you just
Right.
did. But yeah, I was a little worried about not having that, that hands-on work as much, but
Right.
I'm actually really, really enjoying writing code. So
Nice. Well, good. Everybody enjoys having you here. So yes. But okay, now with like you went back to school for it. So do you feel like it was necessary to go back and get a computer science degree, or and maybe necessary is the wrong word because I know a lot of people ask this question. Should I get a degree? Is it necessary? Do I not need one? Are you glad that you went that path? And do you feel like had you not, would you still have been able to find ways to get into programming and enjoy it as you have now?
I think that, so for me, I am quite happy that I went back to school and got the degree and studied. Mainly because when I graduated with my comp sci degree, and this would be um, starting the late 2000s, so it'd be around, I actually graduated 2008 with my comp sci degree. There wasn't a lot of boot camps, and there weren't a lot of opportunities to get into like entry level positions
Mhm.
without needing a degree yet. I think that has
Okay.
changed over time.
Right.
So at the time that I had graduated, I saw that as a path that I probably needed to go through,
Okay.
And because I was making a career transition,
Right.
um, it's not like I could say, well, I've been doing this on the side and here's some stuff I've like I didn't have anything to show for my work. I
Yeah.
needed to have some way to show that um, this was something I could do, right? So
Right.
that was why I went to school. Now, today, I don't know if I would. I think that a lot of things have changed in terms of even attitudes of hiring, and Perceptive
Right.
Software required a degree at the time. There's a lot of changes in the attitude about hiring, and there's just a lot more available for self-learning
Right.
out there, as well as if you wanted to have some sort of a more of a formalized education, there's also a lot more boot camps out
Right.
there. So I'm not sure I would do that today, but at the time, I certainly don't regret if I had to start from the very beginning, I didn't get all my credits transferred and everything, then I'm not sure it would be worth it.
Yeah.
But since for me, it was just those comp sci classes that I was needed, then it wasn't like a lot. It wasn't like going back to for a full 4-year,
Right.
4
Right.
years of
Well, and
study.
it's hard to make that decision, right? Because you've had a job, you've had an income, a salary, and then to think of making that transition, making that jump. Like I did go to a boot camp, and I quit my job and went back to school, and it was only a 3-month boot camp, but even that, because there's no guarantee of getting a job after that. So it's like
Right.
for at least 3, if not more months, you're going without an income. And it's a really scary thing to not have that. So what was that experience like for you to go from having, this full-on career to then buckling down and saying, well, I'm going to go back to student mode here, and I'm not going to have that? Or did you have some kind of part-time job? How did you do that?
I continued my full-time job as a chemist and went to
Nice.
school at night.
Okay. So you did
So
that. Okay. Wow. Like,
it was, I cannot imagine what this experience would be like if I had children.
true.
But I am child-free, so and have a very supportive spouse who was privileged enough to be able to afford to go, one,
Nice. Yeah.
and have a supportive spouse and child-free. So I was able to make it work where I worked full-time as a chemist, and then I would drive to, went to University of Missouri, Kansas City, which is the local college, and went there almost every night.
Nice.
And then
Wow. Yeah.
studied in nights and weekends. Yep.
Oh, and it does. It takes so much energy and time, and wow, I bet
Yeah.
it's
That
exhausting,
was
isn't it?
4 years, even
Okay.
with
Wow.
just during the summers too. So that was 4 years with just only having to take the credits that I needed for the
Okay.
comp sci graduation.
Wow. And then, all right. So what was the learning process like for you? Because if you're like me, I'm definitely, I think programming requires one side of your brain, and that is not the side of my brain that I had ever really trained. Like I'm the writer. I'm the graphic designer. I'm very art and writing oriented. I do love solving puzzles, like you mentioned. That is something I've always enjoyed doing, and figuring out logic things. But aside from that, I never really was science or math or anything like that. And it really was hard for me to transition, to get my brain to stop thinking linearly and start, mapping things out like you do in code. And what was that like though? Did you feel like going through school and learning how to be a chemist was drastically different than learning how to code, or were there similarities? Like, how did, and maybe did you have study habits from chemistry school that you felt like played well into learning how to code, or were they totally different for you and it was nothing at all related?
It was, I think there was a lot of overlap in terms of, I mean, many of the classes that I had to take, some of them were very coding specific, right? Such as data structures and algorithm, very coding specific, but others were more math oriented. So that was already like, well, I could do that. I already have a lot of math credits from studying chemistry, so just more math, fine, no big whoop. There was a lot of logic, as I said, so that was not a problem in terms of thinking that way. Now, I'm the opposite from you. Feel like I have zero creativity. It's so hard for me to think that way and to write things in a way that isn't just more structured and logical.
Okay.
So it seemed to fit easier for me, this transition. I will say one thing I feel like I brought over from my chemistry background into my work in comp sci is how to break down problems into smaller, achievable tasks.
Okay.
Meaning, in terms of debugging, like applying the scientific process of holding on to one variable and making sure and having only one variable change, like things like that.
Yeah.
I noticed that I was a lot more structured in the way I would approach that sort of problem solving than my classmates or my coworkers
Okay.
are. So I think there is maybe a little bit less structure with comp sci than there was in studying chemistry and applying chemistry, but I felt like it wasn't like maybe having to write or draw. I couldn't do it. That's not anything I could ever do.
Yeah. That's another thing I love about programming, though, is that it doesn't necessarily matter what your background or your particular strengths are. You can find a place in programming. I just love that. And I don't know that I could say that for every profession, right? Like being a doctor is not for everybody. So,
right.
But I think with programming, you can find your place, and I love that. But what was, because you said you started off by learning back end, so C#, and what was that like for you? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what did studying and learning look like for you? When you sat down to learn something with C#, was that you going through tutorials? Was it watching videos, or how did that look? And did you feel like there was anything that was particularly difficult for you?
Well, I don't know if there was a whole lot out there. I mean, even in the early to mid 2000s, in terms of YouTube videos or other sort of videos or other tutorials. I remember, and it was C++, so I remember having the C++ complete like reference guide, and it was this big honking book, reading through that, and then looking at of course, the code that we write in college for classes is nothing, right? They're just so small. And then being exposed to the code base at your first job is eye-opening. There's millions of lines of C++, and then trying to get it all to actually work and run. And I think I put breakpoints everywhere, just everywhere. And then I would perform actions in the UI. And the front end was a Microsoft Foundation class desktop app. Back, it was client server application. So I just put breakpoints everywhere and then perform some sort of action and then just write down, where was I? What happened when this breakpoint hit? And try to just understand the structure of how all this worked. Yeah.
Okay. So it just pains me to even think about that first time job when you look at the code base and it's just that like huge wide eyes and you're like, what is going on? Yes. I remember that too. And I even remember writing down like the name of my branch, because there's just so much going on in your head that, someone would be like, well, what branch are you on? You're like, well, I don't know. So I started like writing it down literally and keeping track of this branch was with this. And anyway, I was a little overwhelmed, to say the least. But okay, so when did you start transitioning into front end then? When did that start coming into the picture for you?
So my job at Perceptive was everybody there is full stack. The expectation, the thought was that if you can write code, you can write any code, and which is a great positive attitude to take. I've seen other places where they'll say, oh, we need somebody with a specific code skill set, right? And that is not the approach that Perceptive took. It was like, you just learned. So it was full stack of everything, which meant that front end at the time was C++. Then there was also a Java applet front end and a C# front end. It wasn't until I had been there for probably close to about 5-6 years before they started looking at web. And then so we think of front end as Angular developers. Now we're thinking of needing a web app. And that was a big transition, because everything I had done was so strongly typed.
Right.
right? And I really liked that. That was my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So switching to JavaScript, and at the time it was JavaScript with using Backbone, was a really big change. And I really had to learn and embrace that everything didn't have to be typed. Now with TypeScript and Angular, I feel much more in my happy space.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So it took a while to before we looked at web as a like as part of my job, but then it was a little bit rocky, I would say, just really trying to understand how things worked and really understanding the different sort of paradigms of language
Okay.
structure.
Did it come easily for you? Do you feel like when you started to learn how to code, was it sort of like a fish, coming back into water or something, or was it a real struggle for you?
I think learning JavaScript was a bit of a struggle um, for me. It was hard for me to wrap my head
Hmm.
around the ideas of that versus writing something in C++ or Java. So
What did you do to break that down? Like what finally made it so that you were able to crack through that and start making more sense of it?
I think that this is also, so it doesn't really matter how much experience you have as a software developer, but having a really great team where
Hmm.
you can bounce ideas off of each other and get input, have code reviews
Okay.
is really, at least for me, really helpful. So I could try writing something and then getting that feedback
Okay.
just from a team is great.
So really
And
collaborative then.
yes, yeah.
Did you have a mentor at all? Did you work with someone outside of work, or was this all mostly like on the job learning?
This was mostly all on the job learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you recommend that? Like, do you think, I hear a lot of people who are self-taught and they're very proud of that. Like, I'm self-taught. I learned this on my own. Totally give them props because that was not me. I
Mhm.
really relied on having a mentor or two and having people, like you said, answer questions and really guide me. But um, do you think it's necessary? Do you think it is more beneficial, or just is it just a personality thing for someone to need a mentor?
I don't think it's a personality. Well, maybe it is a personality thing, but I, I do not think so personally. Um, I think it's so important for us to have the collaboration, and it's. I don't know if it's necessarily a like universal thing across all industries to be able to have that sort of a collaborative atmosphere where you're asking people to review
Right.
your work, right?
Right.
And I think it's really helpful to do that, especially if you're self-taught, because it's so easy to get in your own little bubble and to not know what you don't know,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so having those external, even so, if you are in a situation where you're self-studying, I think having an external mentor is really helpful,
Yeah.
um, just so that you can be exposed to breadth, right?
Right. Yeah.
And if you are at work, being able to have a team where you can get the feedback, get that collaboration is so helpful as well. Once again, to really build up that breadth.
Yeah.
Um, Having lunch with my coworkers even
Mhm.
there was helpful because we'd hear about what they were working on, what
Right.
they and it could just be on other teams, right, as well, and
Yeah.
any problems that they had encountered and how they solved it. So once again, you're really building out that breadth of knowledge, which is learning from each other. And
Yeah.
that's, to me, is very helpful, and it's also something I value.
It was one of the things I remember when I first started working at ng-conf. I basically went straight from boot camp to working with Joe Eames at Thinkster. And as part of that was ng-conf. And it was all still so new to me. I didn't really know a whole lot of programming at that point. But I just remember one thing that Joe said that really stood out to me was that he he wasn't like some serial job hunter where he'd go take a new job every 3 months, but he did say that quite often, regularly he was taking new jobs specifically so that he could go work with new people and learn from their different experiences. And I just thought that was kind of smart, like, and I don't think you necessarily have to take new jobs to do that. I think in today's world, there's opportunities for you to go to meetups or work with mentors in different ways than taking a different job. But the idea is still there, that you're exposing yourself to working with different people who've gone through different experiences and can teach you a variety of ways to code things and to solve things. And I think it's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
And then something else you said that kind of stood out to me there was like, you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know why, but like it instantly made me think of when I was learning how to golf, because I'm not like a huge golfer, don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, but I'm not good. But I just remember like way back when I was first starting, I did take some lessons, and this was maybe like 3 lessons was all. But I just remember I'd go to the driving range and I'd sit there and I'd swing, and I got pretty good. I felt like I was getting pretty accurate and everything. And then I started working with this trainer, this coach, and he came in and he was like, "Yeah, you're doing it all wrong. Like your swing is you're swinging it more like a baseball player, and this is not baseball. This is golf. You've got to hold your body kind of still." But I didn't know what I didn't know, even though I felt like, look at how close I am. I'm getting to those flags, and I thought I was doing things correctly, but come to find out there were much better ways to do it. And I don't know, I just kind of think of that from time to time with programming, that sure, you did solve it that way and it does work, but is it really the best way to do it? And working with other people exposes you to best practices, right? So I think it's important to do that for sure. One thing also that I'd love to talk to you about. I haven't asked anybody else. I've had Jordan Powell. He's a GDE himself, but you're a GDE in Angular. So how did you get that? Like, what was the path that you took to get that? And then I'll have some other questions about it for you here in a second.
Okay. So my path to GDE was mostly through content and through workshop organization.
Okay.
Yep. So I had been volunteering with the Coding and Cocktails for, I guess, what is it now? 5+ years. And so through that, and then organizing NG Girls workshops as well. Just really trying to help women, get into code and to make it a safe space to learn. And then writing content. So I just put stuff out on Dev.to. So that was really my path. I did not think I was qualified. I'm still not sure I feel qualified, to be quite frank. And I think that that's a problem that I'm sure many people face. Imposter syndrome is real, but I think particularly for underrepresented communities, it certainly, I think it manifests more greatly in that way. So I was thinking, well, I need to do some more things before I'm like actually qualified, right? And I also was writing code, Angular, for my job, and so. And then like honestly built up a application from scratch in Angular at the time. So it was, I thought, there's just more I need to do. There's just more I need to do, and wasn't ready. It was actually Shmuela, who is the founder of ng Girls, who said, no, I'm going to go ahead and submit your recommendation now. You're ready, and she was like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course, you should apply. So that was kind of what launched that whole process.
Perfect, because those are a couple of things I really wanted to ask you about, was like, at what point in your career did you start to want to give back? Where did you feel ready? And how did you know you were ready? because I like you just said, there's that imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough at this to turn around and create content or to teach other people. But at what point did you actually start, contributing and teaching other people? But how did you know you were ready for that?
I think that it takes, personally, I think it takes a long time for somebody, especially from an underrepresented group, to feel like they're ready. And this is based off of my experience with working with both NG girls and with coding and cocktails and trying to suggest that people come back as a mentor. Most of the time I'll hear, oh, no, I couldn't possibly,
Right.
I'm not ready to do that. That's not, I don't know enough. And the answer is, you're always going to feel that way. So,
Yeah, true.
because who knows everything, right?
Right.
So I think it takes a while. For me, it took a bit. Let's see, how long was I now, my first time I started volunteering again and gave back was in, I said for 5 years now, for 2017. That's when I joined Coding and Cocktails.
Okay.
Well, prior to that, it was mentoring as well. I mentored, but it was just one-off whenever there was a need, like somebody, they would say, hey, we need some more people. And I'd be like, oh, I should be able to do that. But it took me a while, since I wasn't doing front end, at like web-based applications at my job. I was still felt like I was fairly new in web development specifically, right? So it took a bit before I felt like I was ready to like give back and do that. Around the same time, I also started co-organizing Angular KC meetup, which requires, as you know, as a meetup organizer, you sometimes have to speak quite a bit. So, sometimes like just diving in and doing that is a good way to start. But it took a while to feel comfortable. Learning is uncomfortable.
It
I
is.
mean, it's just flat out it is. So
Yeah.
I think having somebody to help encourage you to try is really what's helpful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree with that more. I that's definitely one of the most common threads that I've seen as I've done these interviews with different people, is that every single one of you have said something to the effect of working with other people, really finding mentor mentee or just coworkers, like whatever that looks like for you, asking questions, getting comfortable with not knowing answers, but definitely that you got to just be okay letting people know that you don't know everything and being a little bit vulnerable. Super, super important. Couldn't agree with that more. But one thing I'm curious about too is, as you've worked with NG girls, do you feel like there's a concept or two or three that have really stood out to you as those students come in and they are trying to learn this framework? Are there parts of it that you feel like really stand out as the most difficult things that without fail or most of the time people get to this point and, oh, there it is, there's that one thing, it's always tripping people up, that's always where people get stuck? Is there something like that, or is it different for everybody?
I think there is a little bit of difference based off of background of who attends, and I should also say that for Coding and Cocktails, I've also created like Intro to Angular curriculum as well. So based off of both of those streams of people attending and learning Angular, I would say the thing that gets many people kind of caught up on is TypeScript, if they are not coming from a object-oriented programming background. So if people are self-taught or they learn JavaScript first, I think understanding what TypeScript is and how that works and the value of TypeScript, I think trips people up. For the people who have have had practice or have experience with C# or C++ or Java or whatever, they'll be like, oh, thank goodness, right? So I think TypeScript, and then we don't cover this in an ng girls tutorial, but we have just skirted a little bit more into it at Coding and Cocktails is RxJS.
Hmm.
I think that is one where it's like completely what even is going on, you know, and it's really hard to do, at least in the context of both ng girls and Coding and Cocktails, because they aren't a boot camp for Angular, which you have 3 months or X number of, you know, a lot of time to learn. It's the time scale is for Coding Cocktails, a session is on the order of hours. For ng girls, it's at most 1 day, right? And it's like one work day. So it's a really hard concept to introduce and to use. But I think those are the two places of TypeScript and RxJS for newcomers to be like, what even?
What is this? Yeah, no, I hear that. So have you found anything that helps break that down and make things a little bit easier? It's a tough question.
I think it's a really good question. I think, so I'm going to stick with the TypeScript side, because I think with the, on RxJS, it's just a matter of, we need to be, as if somebody who creates this sort of, or organizes these sort of workshops, we need to be cognizant about what we cover in the time allotted, right? And what really makes it so that it's not a frustrating experience for attendees. And so if we focus on the TypeScript side, I think just leaning into it and enabling like strict types and such helps. Because if you don't, then it becomes very confusing as to why do you need it sometimes, or why do you care about it sometimes and not others.
Right.
So having that on as a setting within Angular, and then seeing compile errors or little red squiggly show up in your IDE, I think really helps reinforces what the value of it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Just sticking with it, not flip-flopping back and forth. And so true. Okay. Well, for you personally then, has there been, or even now as you continue to learn, is there something that's part of Angular that either threw you off a lot, that was really hard for you to get, or now what's your biggest challenge? Either or.
I think so. A very easy answer is like right now, what's going on is keeping up with all of the fantastic changes that are coming out, and making sure I really understand what they are, how to use it, what the value of all of these new features, new capabilities are. It's that whole thing, right, with the software, or like writing code, I guess. If you're not running and keeping up with technology and learning, then you're behind.
Well, and especially if your company hasn't updated to that, here we are, we've just released version 15, but my company's back at 12. So if I'm not using 15 every day, then it's not very easy to learn it.
Correct. Yep, exactly. So I think there's, for Angular, I think there's that. In terms of when I first started, I think honestly, it might have been ArcGIS as well, just because it was so drastically different from anything I had ever done.
Yeah.
And just trying to make sure I understood what was going on, what these operators are, how to use it, I still have the documentation for both Angular, so angular.io, and the RxJS API guides and the decision tree. I think I have them up like permanent tabs, because we always have to refer back, right?
I totally hear you on that. I've always got like 12 tabs of just like different tutorials or blog articles or whatever, just so I can go back and refer to them. But yeah, no, I agree. So how do you do it then? Like what advice can you share with people? And we'll kind of wrap things up here in a minute, but what are you doing? You work full-time, you have this full-time job, but then you're also doing, your Coding and Cocktails and ng girls, and you're writing articles and giving talks, how do you find time to learn all of these new updates and these new features and these new skills and really master them as effectively as you possibly can?
It is trying to integrate as many of those concepts together, right, to be efficient. So I'm so incredibly lucky to be a developer advocate, which means that creating content and speaking is part of my job.
Yeah.
So it's no longer nights and weekends like it was previously for
Right.
me, which is fantastic, which means that I'm able to take the time to learn, put together a project, and then write about it and speak about it, right? Which is, I think, really the best ways to learn
Right.
something is to really have to dive in and be able to teach a topic.
Yeah.
So trying to build that all together as much as I can so that it's being very efficient. And volunteering with the coding and cocktails more recently, since I just worked through some of the curriculum stuff for it, it is so helpful to do that. And it's the basics, but making sure that you truly understand how to teach, even if it's a concept like HTML or CSS or the beginning JavaScript or programming logic and fundamentals. It's to be able to break things down to that sort of level of explanation is great. And then having to refer, like I always refer to MDNs, their API guides. And I always learn so much every time even now, every time I put something together for coding and cocktails. It's a fantastic way to keep up with things.
Yeah. It's an intimidating thing, I think, because, and again, this is another thing that I think every single one of you that I've interviewed have said is like either teach it to someone else or like write an article or make a video about it, give a talk on that topic. I think it's hard for someone who's just learning to take that seriously because it's so scary. It's almost like it goes in one ear and right out the other because, well, first of all, like you said, that imposter syndrome, I don't feel like that's really for me, but do you have any tips or advice for people who are on that fence or they're still in that place of like, I don't even know where to start writing an article. I wouldn't even know how to put together a talk. Like what advice could you give them to help them see that you can do this?
I think one place where I felt like, well, there's no need for me to write this article because there's so many out there is that thing exactly right. But the way that you explain it, because the way you understand it, will be different from how there might be, how it might be explained in another article, right? So even if there's multiple, say articles about semantic HTML, let's just say, then having your point of view on there might be helpful to somebody. So don't feel like you shouldn't write that because it already exists. I
Right.
think more content is better. And then for newbies, I have to say, I am really I admire the newbies who write these articles because I mean,
Right.
how courageous is that? And
Right.
I totally get it. It is definitely an act of courage, putting yourself into a position of vulnerability there. But you do learn, and it also gives you an opportunity to get feedback from others. If somebody says, um, hopefully nobody would ever tear you down for it, but
Right.
if somebody does give you some feedback to say, oh, have you heard about this other, I don't know, element or whatever, this is what it does. Well, that was an opportunity for learning, right? And it's going to be the same sort of thing when you do code reviews. So
True.
it's, I don't know, I guess being open to that sort of feedback is
Yeah.
hard, but it's necessary in our industry. I highly recommend checking out, was it Dev2?
Yeah.
What do they call that? Dev community now, I guess, because it is so open and newbie friendly, and a lot of people put stuff out there. So that's a great place as a safe space
Right.
to write content for. And then adding the tags like code newbie, 100 days of code, or beginners, then that really helps. It helps create that community of other people who are also learning and sharing their what they have learned. So it's great to do. They have a conference called Codeland, which is specifically for newbie devs.
Right.
So I would recommend applying for that on something that you've learned about and you want to share. And if that's too big of a venue, which I totally get, check out a local meetup and share. That's a lot smaller of an audience usually.
Right.
So if you feel nervous, you don't have to be as nervous in front of hundreds of people. You could be nervous in front of 5 people,
Right.
depending on the meetup that you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and I could tell you as a meetup organizer, we always want speakers. So
Agreed. Yes.
yeah, so I would say try
Totally.
that out. Yeah, and it really does. Everybody wants you to succeed, so it's a great way to get that opportunity to learn from others, from the feedback and comments that they might provide.
Right. Yeah. One thing you said that stood out to me was like feeling like I can't contribute because this has already been taught 12 times, 1,000 times, whatever it is. But one thing that you learn as a teacher, in fact, it was one of the things I learned really quickly, was that when I would, and I'll do some teacher talk here with you, but it's called schema. When you're tapping into someone else's personal like history, their memories, their experiences, it's called tapping into their schema. And it's such an important part of teaching though, because as a teacher, I could get up there and I could read from the manual, right? Like I could be droning on about certain concepts very like matter of factly, but the real magic always happened in my classroom when I would find a topic that my students were, not all of them, because that's really hard to find something all of them like, but I would find different topics and I would really try to use that as like a segue or a vehicle for teaching a topic. And as soon as you started mentioning, like you mentioned Mark Hamill, and obviously I really love Star Wars, but if I ever brought in Star Wars, I would instantly have like 3/4 of the class who was just hanging on my every word. And if I could relate the math or the writing to that topic, I was tapping into their like what made them excited, and it got them to really come into the lesson. And so as a developer, you might be new and it might be the same topic that 50 other people have already taught, but your unique interests might be exactly what someone else needs. You're tapping into someone else's schema that interests them and helps them learn something that they never got from any of those other articles. And so I think just keep that in mind, that your unique experiences really can add value, even if the lesson is otherwise totally identical to someone else. But that's something that's helped me just kind of get over that fear a little bit. Yeah, but okay, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I do just want to ask if you like now where you are, as you've gone from chemist to senior developer advocate, is there anything that you feel like in your learning journey would have made things easier for you, that you wish maybe you had known a certain tip or trick that really helps you now, that you wish like newbie Alisa knew back when you were first learning?
Tip or trick?
Or even just the way that you learn Angular or a new skill?
I think that what would really help, and I think really understanding really understanding how we learn, and specifically how you learn, is really important,
Yeah.
right? So being able to recognize, for me, I learn better by reading and by working with my hands, so kinesthetic learning,
Right.
understanding that about myself, and I don't learn as much from like videos. So understanding that about myself helps me hone in on what sort of content to look for that will
Right.
help me learn. And you may be somebody who learns a lot better from video, so making sure you tailor your learning for you and tailor the content that you create for you as well. As I absolutely agree with what you were saying about adding your own unique voice. And I think having that own perspective is, especially as if you're a member of the underrepresented community, being authentic to who you are in
Right.
the content you create will really resonate with others, right? So I think truly understanding what is the best mechanism for you to learn is the one thing. Because I think when I first started, it was just as many different mechanisms I can get a hold of because I knew I was behind, right? But I think just learning smarter might be
That's a good
the
way to
one big
put it.
takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that kind of hits a pain point for me because when I first started learning, when I went through college, like first time I was someone that really remembered things when I wrote them down. And so I can
Mhm.
remember going through textbooks and the things that I really wanted to remember, I'd write it down. And I started doing that with programming, and I'll still do it again, from time to time here and there. But I spent way, way too much time writing down way too many lines of code. And it was quite
Mm.
wasteful of my
Yeah,
time when I should have been typing it out and coding it. So that was something I wish I had known better, that, writing it down is not the same thing as coding. Like, just get in and, do the real thing. So
right.
yeah, I totally agree with you. But thank you so much. It's like I've learned so much from you, just learning from your experiences and your story. I always love talking with you. You're just such a sweet person and so wise though. So thank you for sharing everything. And I'd love if people can connect with you. Definitely if you need a speaker, Alisa is always eager to be a speaker at your events. So let her know.
Yes.
But I think your Twitter handle is exactly your name. So it's
Yep.
Alisa Duncan, and everybody, Alisa is spelled Alisa, and then Duncan is Duncan. So that's her Twitter handle. Is there anything else you'd like, a website or anything where you could tell people to go, or where you'd like to have them find you?
I think you can also find me at Alisa Duncan on Dev2. So if you want to check out any of the posts that I have written, it's probably a good place to look.
Perfect.
And thank you for inviting me, Brooke. I enjoyed talking with you. Every time we talk, I always learn new things about you too. And I think it's like, oh, she's just so awesome. So,
Okay, well, thank you. This is
so
why
thank
I love
you. It's
doing these
wonderful.
things, though. I just think people's stories are so fascinating and so much fun. But yeah, thanks again. And then everybody go watch Alisa's talk on the ng-conf YouTube channel. You can go back and watch her talk from ng-conf 2022. So good. But yeah, definitely recommended. So all right, well, thanks again. And I have no doubt we'll do this again.
Thank you.